Kia ora koutou. Welcome everyone to our webinar for the Outdoor Dining Policy Review. I'm Danielle Endicott, an Engagement Advisor here at Council and your host for this webinar. A big thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoons to join us online today. A bit of an agenda. So you'll see on the screen that we'll be covering a few things today, but before we jump into the content, I'll first introduce the team behind the screen and let you know how you can participate during the session. So today you'll be hearing from Ruth, our Senior Policy Analyst and also the project lead for this review, and also Katie, the Team Manager of Traffic Operations. And we also have Stephen, who'll be popping in a bit later to help with questions, and he is the Manager of Operations Transport. So your mics and cameras will be switched off so we can keep the session running smoothly, but you can ask questions in the Microsoft Teams chat, which is located at the top bar menu as a speech bubble. If you're not able to use this function, you can email questions to letstalk@ccc.govt.nz. We will answer questions at the end of the session, but feel free to send them through as we go. If you're finding it hard to hear or if you're experiencing sound issues, you can turn on live captions. To do this, just click on the small three dots above More at the top of your Teams screen and click Turn on Live Captions near the bottom of the drop-down list. One last thing from me. Hopefully the banner came up to let you know that this session is being recorded. This recording will be shared on our YouTube channel in the next few days. You will receive a link via email showing how you can access this. I'll now hand over to Ruth to start the presentation portion of our webinar today. Thanks, Ruth. I think your mic's off, Ruth. Just fix that.
So thank you for taking time out of your day to come to our webinar. So it's about our new outdoor dining policy that we proposed and the guidelines, and they propose to replace two very old policies which are quite out of date. So I guess perhaps the next slide. And yeah. So maybe go back one. Thanks, Danielle. There we go. So the outdoor dining policy in public places applies to open space under the control of council. So currently there are about 74 licences in total throughout the Christchurch district, about half of those in the central city and about half in suburbs in Akaroa and the rest in Akaroa and Littleton. It only applies to public open space, so it doesn't apply to private outdoor dining at all. So so that's where it applies, and the current policies are no longer fit for purpose. So we propose a number of changes in the new policy, apart from making it much easier to read and understand. We're going to require that the outdoor dining areas themselves are accessible for pedestrians of all ages and abilities. So we've had comment from our accessibility advisory groups that sometimes outdoor dining spaces in public places, council-controlled public areas, aren't very accessible for people in wheelchairs and otherwise with their mobility restricted. So that's one of the changes. So as well as wanting to have a clear footpath beside the outdoor dining area, we want everybody to be able to access those outdoor dining spaces. Another significant change is that we propose to require licensees to have smoke-free and vape-free signage and remove ashtrays or other receptacles for smoking and vaping litter from their outdoor dining areas. This is comes from a change in policy by the council, which we've had a priority for outdoor dining areas to be smoke and vape free for some time now, but the sort of voluntary approach hasn't worked very well. We haven't had a huge increase in the number of licensees who have had been smoke and vape free. So we want to bring this in as part of our smoke and vape free policy. I've already mentioned that, we're going to require an accessible pathway alongside outdoor dining areas on the footpath, and this doesn't change. The only thing that's different about the new policy is that we propose to be a bit more flexible in the area, the width of the clear pathway that we propose. So we'll look at this situation in particular. If, for example, the outdoor dining area doesn't actually alter the current accessibility, we may look at it more closely and especially in areas where there are low pedestrian numbers, that sort of thing. We have a specific requirement for licensees to manage litter and waste associated with their outdoor dining activity, including in the immediate environment. So not just in the outdoor dining area, but if the litter and waste is associated, as it were, derived from the outdoor dining area, we intend to make it a condition of their license that they clean up that too. And the final major change that I'm going to talk about here is that there's a defined term for licenses. We propose currently for it to be up to 3 years rather than the open-ended term. This allows us to review outdoor dining licenses, and it means that also that licensees can renew it will mean that they can renew their license, change their furniture or whatever they wish to do. Relatively straightforward way. For example, we would hope that if people don't want to change and there's no problem, that we intend that they will be able to apply for a renewal of their license online, and it can be granted in a straightforward way. But it gives the council and others, the licensee, people affected, the chance to have a look again at the outdoor dining area and see if it's still fit for purpose or needs to change. So those are the major changes that we propose. They're not actually very big changes. And together with that, we intend to have much more straightforward online forms, easy to read guidance to help licensees, because the council is very keen to encourage outdoor dining, provided it's managed appropriately. Yeah, so you will have seen, I'm pretty sure that anybody will have had a look who's on this webinar will have seen, but not only the policy, but the attached guidelines and standard conditions. And that's quite a short document, but it's to provide additional systems to explain how to set out an outdoor dining area, what we require, what the standard conditions are. The standard conditions, which are at the back of the guidance, they're actually all pretty well standard for the standard conditions we have now. It's just, rather than being written in legalese and part of a 13-page document, which is your license, they're written straightforward way and there for you to have a look at, for example, before you apply for a new license or renewal of your license or whatever. So yeah, I hope you have a look at those. We want to get feedback also on the guidelines and standard conditions. So if there's additional material that you would find helpful or something that you don't quite understand, we'd really like to get your feedback on that as well as on the policy itself. So I think that's probably, that's it for my little bit for the outlining what the policy review is about and what we propose. We're in the middle of the public consultation and it's open till the 28th of this month. And it's likely that there'll be hearings early October at present. If you want to make a submission, I would encourage you to make a submission. And if you want to be heard, there's likely to be a hearing on the 6th of October. Can't confirm that. After the hearings panel, which will be a panel of elected representatives, will make recommendations to the council, and we expect the council to make the decision before the end of the year. We anticipate, and the new policy and guidelines should be in place at the beginning of next year. So that's the next steps. And questions? Have anybody?
Yeah, awesome. I can take over the questions portion and just lead us through that. So now we have time for questions. If you would like to ask a question, please put it in the chat now if you haven't already. Or as I said previously, if you cannot access the chat function, sorry, my mic. Apologies, I'll just continue. If you cannot access the chat function, you can email your question through to letstalk@ccc.govt.nz. We may not get through all questions today or have the answers to certain questions, but we will make sure to answer these in writing and email the response back to you. So we had a few questions come through earlier, which I'll start putting towards our project team. So the first one is, how would the new policy affect businesses that hold an existing license? Oh, Ruth, you might just want to turn your mic on for us.
So I guess in terms of the policy, the main change is that they're likely to they would have to go smoke and vape free if they're not already. In other words, in terms of having the signage and removing any ashtrays. The licenses that are current will remain current until they're reviewed. And we will intend to do that on a progressive basis, so it may take some time, but we'll give licensees plenty of warning. For most licensees, talking to the transport team, nearly all the outdoor dining areas are on a road, public road, one or two, I think, are on park. But talking to the transport team, for many licensees, there'll be little or no change. There will be, other than they will be signing up to a new license agreement, which, as I hope I've mentioned, we hope to have a much easier to understand, straightforward license agreement for you to look at and agree to. So that's it from me. I don't know whether Katie or has anything to add to that.
Just that we'll do it on a progressive basis, and because there's quite a few to get through, so we'll be looking at each one individually. And as Ruth pointed out in her presentation, with regards to the widths of accessibility, etc., by looking at each one individually, we will determine each one individually rather than on a previously slightly more prescribed set of parameters.
Awesome. So I have another question here. Will there be any cost to Christchurch Council if there is a need to widen footpaths for outdoor dining?
I'll answer this one. It's unlikely that we would widen footpaths unless it's in part of the capital programme. There is options that are mentioned, I believe, Ruth, for you might want to speak to this about maybe doing parklets on parking spaces which are outside of a particular premises, so they could take over the parking space area. That's yet to be determined, but I doubt that we would have the budget to widen footpaths to provide additional space for outdoor dining, unless it was part of a road upgrade, and that was part of the design features of that particular road upgrade.
Yes, the new policy is proposed to be a bit more flexible, as we've said, and so we're looking also at making available perhaps parkland where it's suitable, in other words, it is appropriate to have outdoor dining because of the classification of the reserve, and it's consistent with the reserve management plan. So there may be small areas of park which may be available where, for example, the footpath is too narrow. And there is, as Katie mentioned, the possibility of parklets. Council has had these platforms over the road, normally over what was a parking space. There were one or two put in after the earthquakes. My understanding is that a parklet is a structure on a road, and that would may be possible in certain circumstances, but the applicant would have to pay for that, including the construction, etc. Whether they would have to pay the fee for the use of that part of the road would be determined separately. So the parklet is a possibility where there are narrow footpaths and outdoor dining is not appropriate because of the narrowness of the footpath.
Cool, thank you. Another question we have is, will there be any increased charges for applying to have an outdoor dining licence? And will there be a rate to do a renewal after you've reached the 3 years?
So this policy of itself makes no change to the charging for outdoor dining areas. The council's policy is to charge for the use of public open space for commercial purposes, such as outdoor dining or mobile shops or whatever. And in terms of outdoor dining, the more valuable the space, the higher the rate per unit metre is. But this policy change makes no change to the to fees and charges. At present, the council doesn't have a charge for applying for an outdoor dining area at all, or for renewing an outdoor dining area. It will be up to council, and council regularly reviews fees and charges, normally as part of the annual plan, but sometimes outside the annual plan. If so, it will be a public consultation. But this particular policy isn't really about fees and charges or changing the way we charge. That's a separate question.
Another question, someone's just asking if we can clarify on that transition period as licensees go over to the new licence and policy. Is there a time frame yet for what that transition period would look like?
No, we don't have a time frame. As say, once the policy is all approved, adopted, then we would start working through those licenses. And as we know that when a property or a premises changes hands as far as the license holder, the licenses with that particular business owner, and therefore there will be a certain amount that will automatically be renewing as we go, but the others will be done on a as and where we can with staff resources. But we hope for certainty for all of the people who hold licenses that we will get to them within a reasonable period of time in case they have any questions. But we're always available for questions in the meantime if they do. And as Ruth said earlier, we will provide them with sufficient warning of when they need to apply and what they'll need to provide for their application.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. There's another question here around creating safe, adequate and predictable pathways alongside outdoor dining areas. Just wanting clarification on how this is possible if there's no requirement to have a detectable visual and tactile barrier around the activity. Do we have any comments on that? Maybe just in terms of Oh, yes, sorry,
Yeah,
Katie.
sorry. So yeah, in many cases at the moment, especially in the central city, people do tend to want to enclose their space with a sort of a low barrier to sort of create a space, and many of them are like that. But as you say, others don't have. They just have their tables and chairs outside their premises. Again, it's important for visually impaired people that there are clear pathways. So we would make sure that where those instances came, that those tables and chairs were kept as close as possible to the building edge, so they didn't stick out into the footpath, and the business owners would be expected to make sure that didn't happen on a daily basis. You know, if their patrons decided to start moving tables and chairs around, they would control that and move them back again.
In terms of having smoke-free and vape-free outdoor dining areas, would there be any requirement for licensees to have internal policies on how to manage customers who choose to smoke and vape in these spaces? Ruth, your microphone's off.
So my microphone's off again. I hope you can hear now. The expectation, the clear expectation is that there'll be signage and that there'll be no ashtrays as a minimum. The Cancer Society, through its Fresh Air project, also provides free signage for smoke and vape-free spaces, and it also provides support for venues that want to go smoke and vape-free. So we encourage the managers of outdoor dining areas to help their staff know how to respond when if people refuse or continue to smoke and vape. It's still it's not an offence to smoke in a public place, but most people are reasonable and adhere to what are the sort of social norms and requirements, especially when there is signage. It is very desirable for a lot of patrons to be in a smoke and vape free area. And I know that the Cancer Society would say that it's very popular. So, yes. So the assistance of the Cancer Society for operators of outdoor dining areas is available.
Cool. So we have another question here. Would you be able to comment on what issues we've had with outdoor dining that's called for some of the policy changes?
I guess one of the most obvious ones is people actually moving out of their licensed areas into areas which are not licensed. And yes, they just spread their tables and chairs, and the patrons move into areas that are not licensed. And what that means is that our footpaths are less accessible. Yes, and it's not really very fair, to be honest. So that's one of the main problems. There have also been problems with waste from outdoor dining areas migrating to other areas along nearby. That has been a problem with some quite popular outdoor dining areas, that the waste hasn't been managed appropriately. So it hasn't been managed by the owner of the premises which sells the food and beverages to the outdoor diners. Over the years, there have been a number of complaints about excess noise and things of that nature. There are already in people's licenses, there are conditions about, for example, not being too noisy and adhering to district plan requirements with regards to noise. But with a new license and new guidance material, we hope to make these sorts of controls clear.
Okay, I'm wondering if our project team has any comments on cases where furniture is too heavy or there's not enough internal space to bring in all outdoor dining furniture in during nighttime. Did you have any advice around that?
Again, it does say in the guidelines that because we do everything on a case-by-case basis, that there are some examples that you'll probably be able to point to, or we could point to in the central city, whereby the type of furniture is not movable, so it does stay out all the time. But the way it's positioned, then it's not in anybody's way. And yes, we would monitor if it were moved in any way. So not everything has to be moved every night. However, if you've got very light tables and chairs, it would probably be to your advantage to make sure that they were secured at night so that they weren't removed from your outdoor dining area.
Cool, thank you. I'm just scrolling through our comment section. There was a question about, will there be any extra staff employed for the new policy? I'm guessing this is around enforcing the policy and monitoring compliance.
Sorry, could you say that one again? Sorry.
Sorry, we just had a question saying, will there be any extra staff employed for the new policy? I'm guessing that's around monitoring it and compliance.
So it will be the traffic operations team who will be reviewing all of the applications that come in. The licenses are actually written up by our property team. As far as I'm aware, no, we will be undertaking this work within the resources that we have existing in council.
Thank you, Katie. We have quite a lot of feedback that we'll be able to jot down as well and take as feedback for the review. One piece of feedback is saying that maybe we could call the standard conditions suggested conditions because there is flexibility within them. So that's something we can note. I am looking at some of the questions. I think they might be for other teams within council that we will have to get in touch with the right staff and email responses to those. We did have one question. This might be the last one we do today. So New Zealand Standard 4121 requires temporary and permanent features to have a higher clearance than the 1.8 height proposed in this draft. It also requires detectable features to within 150 millimetres of the ground. Do we have any thoughts on how that aligns with this policy?
So I think our guidance talks about umbrellas there and having 1.8 metres, and that is clearly to stop people, tall people, bumping their heads, etc. The lower requirement is so that people who are sight impaired and may have a detector stick that they use as they walk along, is so that they can actually detect the item of furniture before they bump into it. So that's that one. Again, if you're talking about an individual chair or table, then the width of that you'd probably hit the side of the chair, even though it's above the 1 point. I can't remember what the detail was you said, but although it's above that minimum height. So this is more to do with things like if you imagined a barrier, if it didn't have a low element to it, you could end up walking into the barrier. If it was a wide barrier with two wide legs on it, you would walk into it before you either hit the top or the lower bar of the barrier and either of the sides. So those are just some guidelines to make sure that the spaces are accessible, but also they don't create a hazard to any pedestrians.
Awesome. Thank you for your answers, project team. So just as a bit of context, if you haven't yet made a submission on this policy review, you can head over to letstalk.ccc.govt.nz and have your say by Monday, 28th of August. All feedback and concerns and questions are all very valuable and helpful for us to do this review. And I just want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy afternoons to jump online, share your thoughts and queries with us. If you have any feedback about the session, you can contact our engagement team on that same email that I mentioned earlier. And you can also raise any issues or questions about the project that you haven't had a chance to raise today, and any questions that we might have missed or are outside of the scope of this project, but we can ask other staff about, we'll get back to you via email. And we'll also be in touch in the coming days with the link to this webinar so you can watch it again or share it with your networks. Thanks again from myself and our project team. Tēnā koutou katoa. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.